If I had finals.
All right. So today we're looking at differential equations and solving differential equations. Okay, most of the time differential equations you've seen have come in the form of y prime equals a function or y double prime equals a function. And then this is where you kick the dx over, you integrate, solve for y, figure out what c is. Okay, so that's what this is. There's just one more step in this one than what we're used to, and that is we have to do this variable separation. Okay, that's the only thing different than what we've done in the past. Okay, so our first problem here, we have dy over dx equals 2x over y, and we want to solve this thing. Okay, so if it says we need to do some variable separation, what do you think that means? What'd you say, Abby?
We gotta separate those variables.
We gotta separate. What do you mean by separate?
Like, get them by themselves.
More specific than them.
The variable. And like, put this variable by itself and this variable by itself.
We'll name them. There's two variables here.
Put x by itself and y by itself.
All right, get the x's on one side, get the y's on one side. We're always going to take the y's and move the y's to the left. We're going to move the x's to the right. So obviously I need to multiply the dx over. So that's going to be 2x dx on this side. What am I going to end up with on the left side? Y dy. Okay. And then we want to integrate both sides. So if I integrate the left side, what do I get? 1/2 y squared. And the right side?
Just x squared.
X squared. And don't forget the c. Okay. But what does the problem ask us to do? Solve for y. So we need to solve for y. So what do I do to solve for y? Multiply by 2. So y squared equals 2x squared plus, notice that I put a little mark on that c. Why did I put a little mark on that c to identify a second c? Is this c the same as this c? No, why not? It's been multiplied. So anytime you do something to a c, you need to change the subscript of it.
Why don't you just put 2c?
You just want to do c. You don't want to do 2c.
So it'll always be like C2, or is it just saying that that's
C2, you can do C3, you keep going. But I would always start with the first one. The first one's just C, the second one would be C2, C3 from there.
okay? So even if it was like 1/3 y
Right.
squared, it'd still be C2. Okay.
Okay, then what's left? Square root. Don't forget the plus and the minus. So I get y equals plus and minus the square root of 2x squared plus c2. Okay, and I've done what the first part of the problem has asked me to do. Any questions on the first part of solving a differential equation? Separate and integrate. That's all there is to it. Okay, as this says, what we have just found right here is the general solution. Okay, what we've just found is the general solution. What is going to be in a general solution? The C is going to be in a general solution. So if you still have C in your problem, that means you're dealing with a general solution. Okay? So we want a specific solution. If we get a specific or particular solution, that means they've got to give us an initial condition. So they give me the initial condition, y of 1 equals -3. So what does that tell me to do? Plug it in. So I'm going to plug 1 in for what? For x, and plug the -3 in for... So if I plug 1 in, that's just going to be 2 plus C2. Now, as soon as I plug in, I need to choose. If I have a plus and minus, I need to choose whether or not it should be a plus or whether or not it should be a minus. In this case, should it be a plus or minus, and why? John Ryan?
Is it a minus because your initial condition is negative?
More specific. You're on the right track. What about what part of the initial condition?
It answers the initial condition negative.
The y value is what I'm wanting to hear. This tells me that my y value equals a negative number. Okay, so right here, when I have a y equal to a square root, in order for that to be negative, which one of these do I need? I need the negative 1. So at this point right here, I know that this is a negative instead of a plus and a minus. So I can change this to a negative. Okay, and then I'm just solving for C from here. So what do we do next to solve for C? Yeah, the negatives are going to cancel. Negatives are going to cancel, and then I square both sides, so I get 9 equals 2 plus C2. So that means C2 is going to be 7, and I can plug that back in. So y equals, we decided it's going to be a negative 2x squared plus 7. There's my solution.
So wait, how did negative happen? Or change from negative to positive?
Because that says y of 1 equals a negative 3. So when I plug in something right here, the only way this can be negative is if that out there is negative. And it says when I plug in an x value into y, I have to get a negative answer. So that's why that has to be negative.
How did your negative 3 change to positive 9?
Here? Well, I had a negative over here and I had a negative over there, so those negatives cancel. And then I squared both sides. So 3 squared gave me 9. The square over here took...
So how are you able to just cancel out both sides of the equation like that?
Multiply both sides by negative 1 or divide both sides by negative 1. Okay, so here's my solution. Okay, and we want to know 2 things right here. Okay, what 2 things do I know about y equals negative square root of 2x squared plus 7? What 2 things do I know? Mallory?
It's the area of the curve.
I need a definite integral to be able to do that. But at least you're thinking. What else? What 2 things what do I know for sure about this function right here? There's 2 things I know about that function.
Are you talking about like the shape of it?
Nope. Done right?
Is that the change in 2x over y?
No, but you're getting to where I want you to go. You're getting closer to where I want you to go.
Well, it's the function above, right?
This is the function above that, okay? Which means if I do what to this, I'm going to get this.
Take the derivative.
Derivative. So the derivative of this is this. That's one thing I know. The other thing I know is if I plug 1 in, what am I going to get? I'm going to get negative 3. Those are the 2 things I want you to know when you're solving a differential equation. When you take the derivative of this, it's going to be what you started with. And when you plug in the value that they gave you, that's the value you're going to get. So those 2 things should happen. So if you ever want to check yourself, that's what you can do. If I plug 1 in, do I get a negative 3? So if I plug 1 in, that makes it 2 plus 7, which is 9. The square root of 9 is 3. Stick the negative on it, I get my negative 3. Okay? Then I could take the square root of this if I wanted to, and I should end up with this. Okay? All right, next one. All right. All right, y prime equals x squared times the square root of y, and y of 3 equals 4. So what do we do to get started?
Just
Separate.
the y on one side.
Separate the variables. So what's the left side going to look like?
Y prime over the square root of y.
All right. Well, let's change it to dy. And what's the right side going to be? It's going to be x squared dx. What you just did right here, these normally show up on a free response question. What you just did right here, the separation of variables, that's your very first point when you're doing these problems. So that's an easy point, is separating the variables, you get a point right there. Yes?
Is the dx over there because you changed y prime to dy over dx?
Y prime is dy over dx, kick the dx over, yes.
Do you have to change it to that every time?
Yeah, you want to move it to this when you're doing differentials. All right, what's next?
Integrate.
Integrate. Right side is going to be easier than the left. What do I end up with on the right side?
1/3 x cubed.
1/3 x cubed plus c. The left side, what do I want to change that to before I integrate?
Y to the negative 1/2.
Negative 1/2. So y to the negative 1/2, if I integrate, is going to give me a positive 1/2, and the 2 is going to be out front. All right, now what do I need to do? And let me stop and tell you some more of your point situation. So I got 1 point there. This right here, I'm going to get 2 points from this piece. You're going to get a point for integrating both of these correctly, and you get a point for putting the plus c in there. So far we're up to 3 points. Okay. All right. What's my last thing I need to do? Solve for y. So what do you want to do to solve for y?
Move the 2 over.
So divide by 2. So that's going to be 1 over 6 x cubed, and this c turns into c2. All right. Then what?
Get rid of the 1/2 power.
Get rid of the 1/2. So how do I get rid of the 1/2?
Square both sides.
I square both sides.
Why not c to the 1/2? Or c 1/2? So you multiply the 1/2.
Anytime you multiply or divide a c, it just changes from c to c2.
So you multiply by 3.
Even if I multiply by 3, it changes to c2. You're just keeping track of how many iterations of the c are there. Anytime the c changes, you got to put a different number in there. That's all you're doing. Okay, and right here when you square both sides, make sure you have all of that in parentheses. Okay, now, so that would be another point. Getting the y by itself would be another point. Okay, so what have I found right here? I found the general solution. How do I know this is a general solution? It has c in it. I solve for y, it has c in it, so it's the general solution. Now I want to get the particular solution. So what do I do to get the particular solution? Plug in. So I'm going to have 4 equals 1/6. So that's going to be 27. 3 cubed is 27. Plus c2. Now what I did right there is also a point. When you plug in the initial condition, you get a point. Okay. Alright, so oh, I forgot the square, thank you. Alright, what's next? Solve for c. What do you want to do to solve for c?
Square root 4.
Take the square root of 4, which gives me 2. And that reduces to what? 9/2? And subtract. So this is 4.5. So c2 equals negative 2.5. Plug it back in. And you can leave it as 9/2 if you would like. Now, technically I did this one out of order. I was just going off of what we did on the previous one. We really want to, and this is what I want you to do the next time. We really want to, if they give me initial condition to get started, we really want to plug in there before we solve for the y. Okay? So at this point, let's plug in. You don't have to do it, but just watch. And you'll see that we end up with the same answer. Maybe. So this gives me 2. This is 9/2. Hold on. That's why you were looking at me funny. Just trying to figure out why you were looking at me funny. What did I say? This should be 2.5. This is 4.5, so this should be 2.5. So it should be 5/2 instead of 9/2. So then we come back to this point. And then once we have this, then we finish up solving for C. Or solving for Y.
So does it have to be in that order? First, like
Well, this is the preferred order if they don't tell you to find the general first. On the first problem they did, they wanted us to find the general first. If If they don't ask me to find the general first, then this is the way we want to go. Okay? All right, next one. All right, dy over dx equals 4x y squared, y of 2 equals 1. So what do we do to get started?
Separate.
Separate. So what's the left side look like?
dy over y squared.
dy over y squared. The right side?
4x dx.
4x dx. Now, there's something people do, and it can never happen, so don't ever let it happen to you. Sometimes people will end up with the dx or the dy in the denominator. Can happen. Okay? You did something wrong if your dy or dx is in the denominator. dy and dx always need to be in the numerator after you separate. Make sense? So, if you got a dx in the bottom or a dy in the bottom, that's a dead giveaway. You did something wrong. Alright, so we integrate. Again, this is 1 point. By separating, right side's going to be easy to integrate. What do I get?
2x squared plus c.
2x squared plus c. Left side, I want to think about this as y to the negative 2. So what does that turn into? Negative 1 over y. Okay, so I picked up 2 more points right there. Next step we want to do, plug in. So I plug in 2 and 1. This is going to be 8 plus c. So I picked up another point right there. So I'm going to get, what is that, negative 9 for c. And then the final point we get from doing what? Solving for y. Okay. So what we want to do here to solve for y, this one looks a little bit different than the other ones. Ivan, what do you got? Alright, so multiply by y, divide by 2x squared minus 9. In this case, we can just switch the spots here. So negative 1 over 2x squared minus 9 equals y, and that's my final point. So most of the time, as you see, these are going to be worth how much? These are going to be worth 5 points. The only difference might be sometimes they'll give you 3 points for this step. Why do you think they'll give you 3 points for that step? If these integrals are considered to be somewhat challenging, they'll give you a point for each of those when you integrate it. Okay? If they're not considered challenging, then you'll get a point for integrating, and you'll get a point for the c.
This one not have a C to plug into. Is that what it is?
Well, we plugged in right here. We found the c before we found y, which is the way you want to do it if they don't tell you to find the general to begin.
So, but on the other one, we replugged the C back into.
On the first one we found the general, then we plugged in and found c, and then plugged c back in.
But since we didn't have a.
I found c and plugged it in, but I did it before we solved for y.
Okay.
And that's what you want to do.
Okay.
Okay? Solving for y should always be your last step. And we don't want to freak out if we have issues solving for y, because how much is it worth?
1
It's only worth 1 point. So if I do everything but solve for y, I've got 4 out of 5 points, which is pretty good.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Okay? So, solving differential equations, step 1,
Yeah.
separate. Step 2, integrate, and
So, we're not plugging nothing next to it.
If there's an initial condition.
No.
Plus c.
thank you, plus c.
Up.
So separate, integrate, add your plus c, because that plus c is worth how much? 1 point. And if you don't put that plus c, guess what? They're not going to give you any more points for the rest of the problem.
What?
So make sure you put your plus c in there. Okay? Separate, integrate, plus c, then what? Plug in, and then what?
Find the Y.
Solve for y. That's solving differential equations.
Bump that mod.
Questions? I'm hoping you feel like it's manageable, not too difficult. All right.